Sometimes the things that we think will last forever don't. And when they don't, we feel like a failure. But what if it's a stepping stone to something better, maybe even greater? Welcome to A Legendary Mess. I'm Raynemartine. Hey cousins. Today on this episode, I'm going to share one of my most personal stories with you guys. It's about failing forward. My marriage didn't work. I'm not bitter about it. It is what it is. Like, I'm not bitter, I'm not mad, I'm not sad. It is what it is. And that's okay. So, my marriage didn't work out. But instead of seeing it as something terrible and a failing aspect, I learned to turn it into something magical and beautiful, and we're going to touch that right now. So, here's a fun fact. My ex-spouse did give me permission to kind of touch this topic. We're cool, and I'm not going to shout his name out because he knows exactly who he is. And I just want to say, I hope that neither of the sides of your pillow are ever cool. He knows what I'm talking about. We're cool co-parents and we're good friends, so that's an inside joke between the two of us. Anywho, my ex-husband and I, we knew each other since we were 13 years old. We started dating when we were 19. Here's a very unique and fun fact, our birthdays are exactly 4 days apart. He's November 22nd, I'm November 26th. Wild as ever, you would think that's like, oh, you guys would know. Absolutely not. We were absolutely not. I'm gonna be honest, absolutely not. So, we were dating since we were 19. We had gotten married at 25. I'm now 35 and divorced. It's dope. It's not the worst thing in the world. I thought I failed, and in reality I didn't. So when we got married, we went in with the purest intentions, but we also went in with a lot of pressure on ourselves. I had this idea, he had this idea, he had this vision, I had this vision. He romanticized the idea of marriage. I idolized my parents, so it was a hot mess, okay? And this is why it's a legendary mess now. We went in with the purest intentions, with a lot of love, which we still have for each other, but not romantically at all. We went into it with the purest intentions. We went into it with so much love, with so much faith, we just had so much excitement and joy about, getting married. And for me, I had a list. I'm gonna say I'm half and half about that list. I'm proud of it, and sometimes I'm a little like, girl, what was you thinking about it? Won't say disappointed, but it was really like, girl, what was you thinking? I wanted to be married by 25, and let me just say, there were a lot of red flags. 3 of the biggest red flags before marriage, leading into it. 1, I was not very specific in praying. One thing y'all gonna learn is I'm a prayer warrior. I am a Christ representative. It's me and God locked in. We gonna do it. It might not always come off that way to people who are unaware, but those who have known me intimately and know me and they're tight like this, they know. I had been praying to be a wife since I was a child. And I was like, by 25, I'm going to be married. I had spoke this into existence, and literally by 25, I was married to my ex-spouse, who I had placed on a pedestal. Not my finest moment, but it happens. And it was a lot. Before the marriage, praying to be a wife, I wasn't very intentional, and I wasn't specific neither. I just was like, God, I make me the best wife you can make me. Make me a wife. Make me a wife. But I didn't ask God with the intentions of being his wife. So that was one red flag. The second red flag was every time I kept praying for confirmation, God was silent, and I took it as an approval. It wasn't an approval. Sometimes God's silence is not a no and it's not a yes. It might be a not yet or not at this time. Should have been heavily in the Bible at that point, but I slacked, and I'm ashamed of that. But I learned. The third red flag was, if I'm being 1000% transparent, we shouldn't have married each other. We shouldn't have. And we can laugh about that today. Our kids laugh about it too. We laugh about it because the truth is we really shouldn't have married each other. We shouldn't have gotten that far. We shouldn't have even been dating each other, if I'm being honest too. But you live and you learn and you give yourself grace. Remember, cousins, we give ourselves grace in the mess, okay? Although we went into it with the purest intentions, over time, a lot of things started happening. There was secrets that were coming to the surface. There was infidelity. There was a couple of... I'm trying to figure out the best ways to put it, the best words to put this in, but there was a few moments that were dangerous. That's the best way I could put it. And then there was trauma dumping, and that is a thing. And I'm going to touch that. So we had this idea and this vision of how our marriage was going to look, and how it was this and how it was that, and how our lives were going to look, and he romanticized the idea of marriage where I was idolizing it, and that didn't work. And that's okay. And I'm going to explain why. This failing forward was so okay, and it's okay to fail forward. All those ideas and the visions and the thoughts and the romanticizing, the adultery of it all, we were willing to go to make it work at all costs, but at the same time, we weren't growing. And being in a marriage where you're not growing is a hard space to be in. It's actually dangerous. Over time, it was just getting harder and harder. I was miserable. He just was numb, right? And I still had this idea of keeping it all together, making it look that way, and keeping it polished, and not letting nobody know how unhappy we truly were and how terrible this marriage was upon us. And I had a certain pressure on me to not only break generational cycles and curses, but to do what my parents didn't get to do. He created pressure on himself, and one of the pressures that he created turned into trauma dumping. Although he was romanticizing the idea of marriage because he came from a home that was not exactly that, without giving too much, it wasn't exactly that, right? He had something, but it wasn't that. And we went in with pressure that we placed on ourselves, and that wasn't okay neither. It didn't matter how much I tried to cover up for the kids or family members and friends. Overall, we were miserable, like miserable. One of the things that also played into the downfall of our marriage was he stopped having faith in God. Whereas I'm a person who's always going to have faith that God is going to come through, because God is constant and he is faithful, and he is shown me that time and time again, even when I know I don't deserve it. That man, God, cuts grace even when we feel like we are not worthy of it. So I felt like as a wife, I need to be obedient in that too. Cutting him grace where he wasn't his best version, or, things like that. But it got harder and harder, and we were super miserable. And it showed, because the kids started seeing it. And one thing I don't want to do is have my kids looking at me miserable. I don't want no kid looking at me or a person I'm with or married to miserable. That's not okay. And I need to prioritize them. Even though I had to go full speed prioritizing them. And one of the unfortunate fights that led to us divorcing had to do with moving. I had this idea that if we moved and started over in a whole new place, things would be better. This man said absolutely not. Nope. And then told me flat out, if I didn't, if I went forth with moving, he was going to not only take my children from me, he was going to make sure my life was heck and divorce me and go on a smear campaign. Now, that can be scary. That could be really like, whoa, what do I do? So me being me, I wanted to be obedient as a wife, and I wanted to submit to my husband, but it's hard to submit when your husband is not being a husband. And after a while, things were changing, and a lot of things were happening. There was a lot of mistakes being made. There was a lot of falling short. There was a lot of things coming out, like secrets, the infidelity, the trauma dumping. A lot of things were happening and coming out. And that idea, that vision that I had in my head was coming apart. And it was coming apart so fast that I was like, I gotta salvage it up to make it still look that way. No matter how hard I tried, and no matter how hard he would try, it just was not working. And eventually, it came to a huge head. And July 11th, 2019, I'll never forget, that man was in this extreme rage of fit. And he then, in that rage, said some really terrible things to me and demanded I gave him a divorce. Now, days and weeks prior, in my unfortunate misery, he was working late. He often would do that. And my thing was, I was a single parent in a marriage. That is a thing. It happens to a lot of couples, women and men included. It happens. I found myself reading the Bible and crying. And in the midst of me reading, I was reading the crucifixion, and I felt like that's where I was at. I felt like I was being crucified for marrying him. And it wasn't that I felt like God was doing it. I felt like he was doing it. Because I didn't live up to his romanticized idea, and even though it wasn't realistic, I felt like he was crucifying me in a lot of ways. Because he would say things and do things with intent, with malicious intent. And it made me feel really bad. And then it just wasn't okay. So all the while that I was learning, I was reading and rereading the crucifixion, I heard God very clearly and sternly say to me, say yes. I asked God, I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you were silent when I asked to be a wife. Why are you telling me say yes? And I heard, just say yes. Didn't understand. I said, all right, fine, I'll just say yes. At that point, I just agreed. July 11th, 2019 happens. We had moved into a new home. I didn't get to move down south, but we had moved into a new home. And this man was in a rage of fit, which he often was always in. So part of me was kind of like, I expect this. The other part of me was like, why are you beefing? Like, what's the problem? And there was a lot of hurtful things that was said to me. The next thing I know, in the midst of him saying these really hurtful things, he demanded that I got a divorce. And ever so clearly, God said now. And I said, okay. I said it very calmly. Because of me saying it so calmly, that man, I watched the screws become unloose in this man's head, flying out like fireworks. And he cursed me out. I mean, cursed me all the way out. Cursed me out, cursed my life, cursed the kids. It was horrible. And I didn't feel bad for me. I know this sounds weird. I didn't feel bad for me. I felt horrible for my kids. And I felt horrible for little me, not adult me, because adult me at that moment understood what was happening and what I had did and where it stemmed from. And little me, who wanted to be a wife, who wanted to have marriage, who wanted to do all the things that my late mom and dad didn't get to do, was heartbroken. Like, she was crushed. So I had no clue how to move past that. And in the midst of trying to unmarry each other, it came with a lot of trial and error. And he knows this. He knows I'm always still going to say, may neither sides of your pillow ever be cool, because you irritate me. Sit inside joke again. But in the midst of all of that, I found myself crying one night, and I was just really sad. And I hadn't told I told my mom we had gotten into a fight. I didn't tell her that we were getting a divorce. And it was weighing very heavily that I needed to, at that point, say to her, hey, we're divorcing. Like, the only reason I hadn't said anything was because this wasn't the first time this man threw divorce at me. This was now number 7. You hear me? Number 7. He had threw it at me. And I didn't want to say anything until I saw papers and stuff like that. But at this point, I knew for sure we were definitely getting a divorce. It wasn't the false alarm that we had already been through. I knew for sure. I felt it in my heart. God was sitting with me and trying to get me to a place of acceptance. And I remember crying one night because I just kept thinking about the kids. I'm like, dang, I just did all this and these kids they're like, I failed. Like, I had all of this for them and now I failed at it. Like, they're gonna hate me. That's what I'm thinking. And then I'm thinking about little me, who's like, we failed. Little me was like, girl, we failed. And then big me was like, I'm sorry. It was a lot. And I ended up going into extensive therapy and getting a life coach because I needed a lot of help. And in the midst of that, I remember crying, and I was like, God, help me find joy out of this situation. Help me find something beautiful out of this situation. And as days were going on, God was doing just that. I was finding the simplicity of just sitting with the kids on any old night and not going out, and just sitting with them and laughing at them, watching them play fight, watching them have all the things that I didn't have growing up. And I wasn't sad anymore. I just felt a sense of joy and peace. And then came the unlearning, and now finding this version of myself. I was in extensive therapy, and I had a life coach that I paid a lot of money for, still paying for it. And she made me do this exercise, and it was 3 parts. It was past, present, and future version of me. The past version of me who wanted marriage, the current version of me who's sitting in divorce, and what I wanted for future me. And she specifically said, do not include the kids. For me, that's hard to do because I don't know how to turn off being a parent. It's hard. And I eventually understood it. And I was like, why would you not want me to include the kids? The reason why she didn't want me to include the kids was it was solely on me. I didn't know who I was outside of a relationship and marriage. And the reason I didn't know that was because since the age of probably like 16, 17, I was in a relationship. So I had no idea who I was by myself alone. And it wasn't as scary as I thought. It was scary because I was like, I'm going to be a single parent. And I got to, like, what is going on? Like, I had all these anxious thoughts in my head. And in the midst of me doing that list, I started to see I was unlearning but relearning new things. I was unlearning how I was as a wife and the preconceived notions I put on myself and the pressures that I placed on myself. And then I was learning who I was outside of marriage, who I was outside of a parent, which I had never really explored before. And after I had did that exercise, I remember saying to God, please guide me through this. I need help. I need as much help as you will allow and send. Help me. And God did just that. I didn't realize that on that list I got to achieve all the things that I was doing, which was finding peace. I found a lot of peace in different things. I got to see who I was single, right? And single Rain I love her. She could be a little, chaotic, but she's cool. She loves to travel. I love traveling. I did not realize how big of a love for traveling I had until I was doing it. I love traveling. I love going to events. I loved going to different events, whether it was a concert or learning something in a class or teaching. I am a dancer, and I danced for a lot of years, and I had stopped dancing not because I was a parent, but because I became a girlfriend, wife, and a lot of that kind of went together because he didn't like that I was always paying attention to those aspects of me. And just like with my faith, he had a problem with me having my bond and faith in God. And somewhere along the lines, I don't know where he got lost, but this was that space for both of us to kind of learn who we were as separate people. And all the while that I was learning who I was, God was also taking his time filling me up with things like my friends. I'm so grateful for y'all, and y'all know exactly who y'all are. I'm so thankful for y'all because y'all did, I don't know how y'all did it, but y'all sat with me through a lot, and I'm so thankful for you guys. Y'all showed up, y'all showed out. Thank God for y'all. And he gave me purpose. God showed me what my purpose was, that I wasn't just that. I was also this, and I was this, and I was, I'm still his child, and then I'm always going to be okay. And I got to do things that a lot of people would think are very mundane, but they're not. Like cooking breakfast every morning for your family. That was fun to me. Learning to be a single parent all over again was great. I found so much joy in certain things like traveling, taking walks, hosting. I didn't get to host because there was other factors on why I didn't get to host, because taking care of my mom also played a priority. But I also got to take my mom out more. And I got to learn more about her rather than us both hiding certain things because of whatever was going on at the time. But I got to learn more about her and learn how to better support her in things that she often wouldn't speak on, but I got to pick up the cues. I got to learn how to be a better daughter. I got to learn how to be a better friend, because there were certain friendships that I had to let go of, unfortunately, because my ex-spouse, he just wasn't willing to let me be amongst those people, But when I got around them again, I just remembered all the joy that I had before, and I got to all those simple pleasures of life, like cooking breakfast every morning, or hosting dinner parties, or just hosting a night with my friends, or even my siblings or family members. Stuff like that I didn't get to do. I was so excited to do. I was excited to take the kids every and anywhere without having to run it really by him and be told, absolutely not, I'm not doing that and you can't do that. I found joy in the simplest of things. And yeah, it came a trial and error, because then I had to find joy in co-parenting. And sometimes co-parenting gets really, really ugly. Like really ugly. And I got to learn how to be a better friend and support system to him in his low moments. And that was something that I thought was so dope. I got to evolve into this space, and over time I realized that, yeah, my marriage failed, but I wasn't a failure. That didn't mean I failed. It just meant I was growing, and I was evolving, and I was a whole new version of myself that I was exploring and I was super excited about. And it's not a loss. It wasn't a loss to me. Although in my head I thought, oh my gosh, my kids are losing this and that, and I'm losing this. I didn't lose all the things that I thought I lost. God really redeemed that in a manner with something simple, because I'm a simple person, and that simplicity brought me so much joy. The support of my friends, the support of family members, being able to travel, being able to learn exactly what my sense of purpose was, how I can harness it and bring it to others. I got to get even closer to God, because I felt often far from him because of my marriage, and because I wanted to be an obedient wife, but I wanted to still be tight-knit with God. And that was hard with being married to a person who doesn't want you to do that and isn't very accepting of that. I learned that, yeah, the marriage didn't work, but I'm not a failure. And even though it may look like I failed, I can fail in the most positive way. And I did. I failed forward. I didn't go back and stay in a situation that was extremely toxic. I didn't force myself to make it work anymore. I adapted, and I learned, and I evolved. And part of that aspect I'm glad I got to do, and I'm glad that my kids, especially my daughters, got to see that, because it's important for me to always lead by example in the best ways with them. Sometimes it's hard and I can't do it all the way I would like to execute it, but those fumbles usually are stepping stones to something better. And each one of us have this dope bond. But when you put me and all my kids together, we're unstoppable. We really are an iconic, legendary mess. And I want you guys to know, if you're in something similar, or even remotely in something that you're in a space of growing, but you're scared, don't be. Embrace it. It's gonna be messy, for sure. It's gonna be real messy, but in that mess, you're gonna learn so many things, and there's gonna be beautiful moments that when you look back, you're gonna be like, wow, that was pretty dope, actually. And there's nothing wrong with growing and adapting and evolving. Sometimes you face growing pains, and growing pains sometimes also mean you have to let people, places, things go. I also learned I can't wrap my identity in a title, and I'm glad I learned that, because boy oh boy, it wasn't fun having to always have that thought in my head that my name and my identity was attached to a title. I'm so grateful for my divorce. A lot of people would say, who would say that, or why aren't you sad? I'm not sad because, yeah, that aspect didn't work, but I still have a co-parent. Might not be perfect all the time, but it is what it is. Sometimes the man goes to the extremes to irritate me and the kids, and sometimes he's right on point and right on time, and either way, I didn't lose too much. I lost a title, time, and a version of myself that no longer exists. But I'm grateful to know that failing forward, it was dope. It was beautiful. It's still a journey, and it will always be a journey. It changed a little bit of how I view marriage. It doesn't mean that I don't want to ever get married again at the right time with the right person that God has intended for me. But this version of myself that I got to learn, and I'm so in love with, and I'm constantly learning and honing and evolving in, it's the best place I've been in. And it's not always perfect. It's going to be a mess, but I'm happy that my divorce happened. I still have a co-parent and a friend, and I have me, this version of me that I didn't even know existed, and she is dope, okay? She be outside, you hear me? Well, not outside like that. Well, at one point she was outside wilding, but not in the ways that you think. But I'm grateful that it happened. I'm grateful that it had to happen, because I wouldn't know who I am now. And I wouldn't want to show my daughters that it's okay being in a situation that does not serve you, that stifles your growth, and you can't evolve in. So, cousins, I want you guys to share your failing forward stories. You can even use the hashtag on social media, a legendary mess. You guys know you can find my handles on IG. I am raynemartine, or a legendary mess on IG. You can find me on TikTok as raynemartine. And if you find me on Facebook, I barely be on there, but I might dibble dabble here and there. But send me your stories, share. And before I sign off, y'all know my rule. It is give ourselves grace, and we're going to remind ourselves it is okay to be a mess. Life does not have to be well put together or perfect, and neither does love. Love does have to be real and genuine, but it doesn't have to be perfect. It could be mess. A healthy mess, not a toxic one, though. No toxicity here. We don't do those. We don't play those type of reindeer games. Anywho, I love you guys, but God loves y'all more. Signing off, I'm raynemartine. This is a legendary mess.